Welcome. Welcome to another episode of The Impact of AI, brought to you by WILDA, Women Leaders in Data and Artificial Intelligence. This week's episode is similar to everything else, where we explore how AI impacts us both professionally and personally. Today, we have this wonderful woman, Mara Pometti. She's going to sit down with us and talk to us about what she does in her role as a lead AI strategist, but also some of the other things that encompass her journey into this field. Welcome, Mara.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really thrilled about this conversation. Can't wait to start.
I always find it very interesting how people get started in the industry and then move their way into data science, artificial intelligence. And similar to your journey, I'm looking at your LinkedIn page because that's where everybody's information is stored. And you have some education in the classics, Romance languages, literatures, linguistics, journalism. I would love to hear the story about your professional journey.
I like to define myself as a data savvy humanist. And in fact, my background is in the humanities. I graduated with a bachelor in classics. Then I hold a master's in linguistics and a master in data journalism. And this is by training, I'm a data journalist. In fact, I used to work for data-driven design agencies and newsrooms before joining IBM. And so what I used to do was to use data as a new language to reveal overlooked stories and communicate those stories with visual representations of the data to make data beautiful, so more human approachable, because I believe that this is the way that we can utilize to make data and AI come closer to us as human beings. And so this is the journey that, oddly enough, from data journalism brought me to data science when almost 4 years ago, I joined IBM in a team that was the IBM Data Science and AI Elite team, as the only data journalist in this team of data scientists. And it was a very interesting experience, very challenging, because of course, my colleagues didn't know anything about what data journalists are and what they do. And honestly, I have to say that with them, still, the majority of the people do not know what data journalists are. Mm-hmm. And so it was a challenging situation where to start applying new skills, new methodologies, and come up with new solutions that could make AI solutions like machine learning models and optimization models more comprehensible, more understandable for people that are not data scientists, that are maybe business stakeholders, that are executives, but they need to understand the impact of AI both on people and organizations.
Can you give us a little bit more, some examples? Doesn't have to be specifically what you're doing with IBM, but maybe some real world examples that help illustrate what you've just talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the very first engagement that I was brought in with my team was about creating a predictive maintenance solution for an energy company based in the UK, whose problem was to predict the failures occurring on the high voltage cables that bring the power from the wind farms to the mainland. And so they wanted to predict the failures, of course, to better optimize the maintenance operations. So the data scientists created the solution. They developed the machine learning models. But when it was the moment to show to the business stakeholders the results of that machine learning model, they presented a few lines of code taken from their Jupyter notebooks, which is the tool that data scientists use to develop their models. They took some very confusing graphics and charts and mathematical formulas that they used over the process. And of course, that wasn't a way to communicate the story of why the machine learning model was impactful for the business of that energy company. It didn't say anything about the potential that that machine learning model could have on the business of this company. And so basically, I helped them to start from scratch in understanding how to communicate the data and how to translate the technical KPIs generated by the machine learning models into actionable knowledge and concrete business results that the business stakeholders, people that do not have any particular knowledge in data science, needed to see to really understand the impact of the predictions of the model on their business. And so I designed and developed an interactive data story to illuminate how that company could progress with AI through a new strategy, basically. I visualized the predictions of the machine learning models and translated these predictions into the financial impact that the model had on the company. And that was crucial to get these business stakeholders understand that that was the way they needed to progress their business and start applying and adopting AI.
When you talk about working with business stakeholders in this example, was it with senior leadership or was it with truly the business users, stakeholders?
Yeah, in that particular example, it was both. There were executives of the companies together with the business users that would have used the outcomes of the algorithm. Yeah, so we had a mix. What I do in my role today is dealing mostly with executives first to develop an AI strategy that aligns with the broader corporate strategy. And then I take the strategy forward with a multidisciplinary team of business users, business sponsors, data scientists, designers, and everyone that implements the solutions. And we define and break down a specific AI initiative into use cases to develop.
When in this particular example, and there's a point to the question, but in this particular example, this company came to you, correct? They had something, in other words, when they came to you, they had did they have a specific use case in mind, or was that something that you developed?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. So the company came to the IBM Data Science and AI Elite team, so our team, initially with already this idea to have a predictive maintenance tool. Okay. What I was able to do with them was to expand on that their initial idea by showing them that what they really needed was a broader solution encompassing more problems of their business. Because what I did was to basically take data gathered over my design thinking workshops and the user interviews that I led with the group of the company. And I merged that qualitative data with the quantitative data generated by the algorithms. So to create basically, to visualize a new scenario, a broader scenario than just a specific or limited predictive maintenance tool that show them how to combine multiple models, multiple solutions, prescriptive and predictive models together to come up with solutions that could not just predict the failures of the cables of the wind farm assets that they have, but that could also be applied to other subsidiaries of this energy company, because they are also provider of oil, gas, and marine services. And so it was really an act of expanding their potential and helping them envision what they could have got from AI by combining different solutions that could have solved their problem.
So the reason I ask is a lot of times companies have a really difficult way, they spend let me rephrase this. They have a really difficult way, understanding of how to develop the pilot. What's the first thing that we should go for? What's the first problem we should solve? Which is what then prompted the question here, because what you've done is they had a problem they wanted to solve, but it sounds like you still kept within the pilot parameters, but you expanded that to recognize that with a few adjustments, this pilot could not just solve one particular narrow problem, but solve similar problems within that same scope.
Correct.
Okay.
In fact, that's the origin basically of my job title today, AI Strategy,
Okay.
because I co-created this framework to really help organizations discovering what are their problems through the lens of the human needs, and then prioritize those problems in terms of risks and ROI horizons, so that they know where to start solving these portfolio, let's say, of AI initiatives. And this helps all the business units in an organization to prioritize their workload and be aligned to the overall strategy. Because once you have a clear roadmap with clear priorities to address in AI, you know what you have to prioritize and what kind of pilots exactly start implementing according to the roadmap. And so we didn't have any method to do that. And over the years, by innovating the mainstream practices of IBM Enterprise Design Thinking, we came up with particular tools that enable companies to create that roadmap, to create that vision for their AI strategy, so that it's clear from where to start with AI pilots.
I'm curious, so you at the moment are sitting in the UK, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm sitting in the US. And what I've recognized, through these discussions that I've had over the past couple years is that the understanding and acceptance, the opportunity or the willingness to embrace AI really changes as I talk to individuals, from one country to the next. I'd like to get your perspective. I know that you speak a lot within the European, Italy and Spain and the UK. What is your perception of how AI is being embraced, throughout the European countries?
Yeah, a difference that I noticed, especially also working a lot with the Middle East, is that in the Europe, there is more awareness of AI regulations that are coming, and a very big attention to trustworthy AI. Which is also absolutely pillar in the US. But here, maybe for cultural reasons, like we always had to deal with GDPR, we had to, last year, the European Union created this EU Act, which sets the guidelines for a law proposal for regulating AI. So maybe this topic is more perceived here. And then maybe areas like in the Middle East, where it's coming. But in terms of patterns in developing AI and using AI, it really depends from the level of maturity of companies more than geographical characteristics, I would say. It really depends on what level you are with your company in terms of data and AI. So the only difference that I see, it's really about a lack, a lack or not of awareness of the upcoming regulations and the need for any AI governance. Which, of course, don't get me wrong, is super well rooted in the US and also in Canada, as well as in the European Union. But my perception personally is that here is something kind of more concrete, where companies know that there is a government entity that is going to supervise everything and regulate AI. And as I said, maybe it's because we are used to have governments above all the companies, and it's the structure, it's a natural structure of the nature of how business is dealt in the European Union. I don't know, my personal perception.
Right, right. So you mentioned that a government regulatory agency, has that already been created yet? How long has that been in operation?
The European Union has
Yeah.
provided the act last year, actually in 2021. It's a proposal for a law, but
Okay.
also the US, Canada, and many other countries came up already with laws and regulations proposals. In fact, the New York City, from January the 1st, 2023, we require the companies to audit the algorithms, so the automated systems that they use in their HR departments. And if they fail to do the audits, they are going to pay fees and with possible also to be sued by the government, by the city of New York. So it's something that it's coming. Governments and institutions see the danger that AI might pose to the human beings. And so they are coming up with guidelines and regulations and frameworks to really help companies in govern the effects of AI. And this, of course, requires regulation. So there are also agencies that are working right now in offering certification, so that exactly companies that use particular tools, softwares, or produce by themselves or with their teams, AI systems, they can guarantee and ensure that their AI systems comply with the specific guidelines and regulations and the standards of the companies, and that are trustworthy and that don't cause harm, or at least mitigate for any risks that can be caused to humans. So it's a big topic, and we see already a big push and movement from governments and institutions.
No, thank you again for your perspectives. It is a good segue because of something that you just mentioned. You wrote recently that you feel that human-centered AI discipline is way too narrow and its definition, and that we need to have a twist. I would be interested if you could elaborate on that comment.
Yes, absolutely. So let's start by saying that human-centered AI is an emerging discipline started around 2017 that aims at extending the user experience design methods to create AI systems and products that augment people's knowledge and performance. Now, talking about extending the user experience method means to focus our attention on the user. And so I found that the human-centered AI discipline focuses too much only on the users, and so the user experience design methods, or the ethical side of AI, so the AI ethics impacts of AI. And so I believe that when we talk about people in AI, especially the beginning of the design of an AI systems, we should look at humans holistically, not just from the action as users, but also from the dimensions of the thinking and the feelings. And so I see that more than having a human-centered AI approach, we should try to develop an anthropocentric view of AI, where humans are really at the center of AI systems, where humans become the measure of any AI systems. And so that we can look holistically at people from all the perspectives of their life. And then after defining their context, their experience, their problems, their feelings, and their thinking, then we can start designing a particular product or service and start talking about user. But we need to do a step back first and really considering systematically all the aspects of the human nature.
If we could dive in a little bit deeper there. So at the moment, some big topics that we have is around bias, and specifically adding more diversity into the earlier stages of collecting the data, the bias around the context of the data, interpreting the data. And then also there is some bias sometimes around the testing and the algorithms. But it sounds like you're saying that there's more, that human-centered AI is more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, it's more than biases in data. It's more than biases of the people working on algorithms. It's about bringing a humanistic approach into the AI practices, meaning extending the vision of AI to what is the strategy behind AI, to what is what are the ways that we employ to communicate AI and to make it understandable to people. It's about the languages and the techniques that we develop to increase the data and AI literacy, to enable anyone, not just data scientists or developers, to understand why AI came to that specific decision. So it's about really encompassing all the practices regarding AI with a humanistic lens, which is made by techniques that we as human beings have created, which are strategic thinking, critical thinking, the scientific method, storytelling, communication. All of those, unfortunately, often are not part of the creation of the AI systems. And then we see the generation, for example, of biases, inequality, discriminations, because the people that work on algorithms optimize for efficiency, optimize for mechanical systems that prioritize the algorithms, the machine, rather than the human thinking. And so I think that a humanistic approach should involve all of that, not just the user experience, not just the design of an experience.
If I'm listening to this and I'm in an organization and I'm developing my team, through the data, the AI, the DevOps, et cetera, what you're referencing, is this like another group of people, another team, or is this, a couple people that have this overarching visibility into that life cycle?
I see a multidisciplinary team that exactly oversees the entire AI life cycle. So not just the machine learning engineers, the developers, the data scientists, the data engineers, but really also designers, strategists, and many other experts that can help the AI developers to center their code, their techniques, their practice on the human needs. And so we need more diversity in terms of skills and experiences. And that's also why I guess my story is important, because at that time, the architect of the IBM Data Science and AI Elite team, who today is the IBM Chief AI Officer, had expressed the need to have data journalists working with data scientists because the need to have multidisciplinary teams and experts that could really make AI closer to people, to humans, to the business, and that could translate the AI's outcome in a way that was consumable for people.
Mm-hmm. So Mara, as we wrap up this discussion, do you have any specific like lessons learned that maybe you've any lessons learned that you'd like to share?
Yes. I guess that the most important lessons for me was exactly let the curiosity to explore different words from mine, from what was to me is only data journalism, and let be transported by different words, because this allows us to see patterns between these words, and this is key to innovation. It's key to create something that doesn't exist yet. And so I guess this is the most important lessons that data science and AI offered to me. So put yourself in totally new and different experience from what you're used to.
So if I think that's brilliant. So my takeaway from what you just said was, yes, I'm going to get in a room from individuals and I'm there to solve a business problem, but really it's stepping back and putting myself in maybe situations that I'm not accustomed to, because it changes the way I think, it changes the way I communicate, it changes the way I interact with others, which ultimately, from what I hear, is where that innovation or those new ideas and those brilliant discoveries are going to come from.
Correct.
Love
Absolutely.
it. Love it. Love it. Well, thank you, Mara, for your time today. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for this amazing discussion, really.
Welcome. Welcome to another episode of the AI Journal. Welcome. Welcome to another episode of the AI Time Journal podcast, where we explore how AI impacts us in all ways that we can never imagine. Welcome. Welcome to another episode of an AI Time Journal podcast. Welcome. Welcome to another episode of the AI Time Journal podcast. For this week's episode, I'll be your host, Melissa Drew.